nor depth. Neither height nor depth can separate us. Hell and death will not defeat us. He who gave his Son to free us holds me in his love. Neither height nor depth can separate us. Hell and death will not defeat us. He who gave his Son to free us holds me in his love. Sing with joy now, our God is for us. The Father's love is a strong and mighty fortress. Raise your voice now, no love is greater. Who can stand against us if our God is for us? Sing with joy now, our God is for us. The Father's love is a strong and mighty fortress. Raise your voice now, no love is greater. Who can stand against us if our God is for us? You're the Word of God the Father. You're the Word of God the Father. From before the world began, every star and every planet has been fashioned by your hand. All creation holds together by the power of your skies declare your glory. Let the skies declare your glory. Let the land and seas rejoice. You're the author of creation. You're the Lord of every man. And your cry of love rings out across the land. Yet you left the gaze of angels, came to seek and save the lost, and exchanged the joy of heaven for the anguish of a cross. With a prayer you fed the hungry, with a word you stilled the sea. Yet how silently you suffered, that the guilty may go free. You're the author of creation. You're the Lord of every man. And your cry of love rings out across the land. With a shout you rose victorious, wresting victory from the grave, and ascended into heaven, leading captives in your wake. Now you stand before the Father, interceding for your own. From each tribe and tongue and nation, you are leading sinners home. You're the author of creation. You're the Lord of every man. And your cry of love rings out across the land. You're the author of creation. You're the Lord of every man. And your cry of love rings out across the lands.
My soul, wait thou only upon God, for my expectation is from him. He only.
Hey, and welcome to Faith Baptist Online. We are so glad you could join us today for our time of worship. If you're a guest with us today, we'd love for you to fill out our connection card at includefaith.org/connect. This is a way for you to share any prayer requests with us or let us know of any needs we can help you with. We look forward to seeing what God has for us today. One of our pastors is going to share an impactful message from God's Word. But before he does, join us as we sing praise to our God.
Well, church family, we're glad that you're joining us here at church via your home. We want to encourage you, if you have any needs or questions, to go to includefaith.org/connect. You can always, as Brother Derek mentioned, give us a call at the number there, 426 6480, or shoot us an email at info@includefaith.org. If this is your first time watching, or maybe your first couple times watching includefaith.org, we want to encourage you to just research a little bit more about our church, or find out more about our church by going to includefaith.org. And you'll be able to find some sermons on there, some information about our church and the ministry here at Faith Baptist in Beaver Creek, Ohio. Well, church family, we had a wonderful service here this morning with Brother Freyer, and we're looking forward to the interview that he's going to give in just a moment. But before he gives that interview with Pastor Paul, we're going to sing some songs. And we want to start off by singing this song, Come Ye Sinners, Poor and Needy. I want you to learn this with us, so learn it before we can sing it here as a congregation.
Sinners, poor and needy, weak and wounded, sick and sore, Jesus and He stands to save you, full of pity, love, and power. I will arise and go to Jesus. He will embrace me in His arms. Of my dear Savior, oh, there are 10,000 charms. Come ye thirsty, come and welcome God's free bounty, glorify true belief and true repentance, every grace that brings you nigh. Come ye weary, heavy laden, lost and ruined by the fall. If you tarry till you're better, you will never come at all. I will arise and go to Jesus. He will embrace me in His arms. Of my dear Savior, oh, there are 10,000 charms. Let not conscience make you linger, not of fitness fondly dream. All the fitness He requireth is to feel your need of Him. I will arise and go to Jesus. He will embrace me in His arms, in the arms of my dear Savior. Oh, there are 10,000 charms.
We're going to continue by singing this song, Praise to the Lord the Almighty. Would you join in as we give honor and praise and glory to our King, the King of all creation. Praise to the Lord, the Almighty, the King of creation. Oh, my soul, praise Him, for He is your health and salvation. All you who hear now to His temple draw near, join me in glad adoration. Praise to the Lord over all things, so wondrously reigning. Shelters you under His wings, oh so gently sustaining. Have you not seen how your desires have been granted in His wise ordaining?
Praise to the Lord, who with marvelous wisdom has made you, decked you with health and with loving hand, guided and stayed you. How often grief has He not brought you relief, spreading His wings for to
Praise to the Lord, and let all that is in me adore him. All that has life and breath, come now with praises before him. Let the amen sound from his people again. Gladly forever adore him. Let the amen sound from his people again. Gladly forever adore him.
O Lord, my rock and my redeemer, greatest treasure of my longing soul. My God, like you there is no other. True delight is found in you alone. Your grace so well too deep to fathom. Your love exceeds the heavens reach. Your truth, the fount of perfect wisdom, my highest good and my unending need. O Lord, my rock and my redeemer, strong defender of my weary heart, my sword to fight the cruel deceiver, and my shield against his hateful darts, my song when enemies surround me, my hope when tides of sorrow rise, my joy when trials are abounding, your faithfulness, my refuge in the night. O Lord, my rock and my redeemer, gracious Savior of my ruined life, my guilt and cross laid on your shoulders. In my place you suffered, bled, and died. You rose the grave and death are conquered. You broke my bonds of sin and shame. O Lord, my rock and my redeemer, may all my days bring glory to your name.
We're thankful that Jesus Christ is the rock. He is our Redeemer. And as we go into this time of giving, I want to encourage you to continue to give to the gospel for the mission of Faith Baptist Church and the mission of the church to go forward, both here in Beaver Creek, Ohio, but all around the world. We're so thankful to have our missionaries here. We've had missionaries every single week, but these missionaries are supported through the giving of the church. And we want to encourage you to take just a moment to go to includefaith.org/give, or to text the number that's on your screen before you, the 937-468-3010. You can always mail a check, but let's continue to give graciously as God has given graciously to us. We have so much to be thankful for, so much blessing, so much affluence here in America. Let's continue by being like our God and giving back to the gospel work.
Well, welcome back tonight to Faith Baptist Church. Hope you enjoyed the time of praise. I know I did, and I hope those songs of truth echo in your heart tonight as we go forward and throughout this week as well. Just taking some time singing, making melody in your heart to the Lord. We're so thankful that you've joined us back in tonight. We're thankful to have the Friars with us, Greg and his wife Becca, and their daughter also Nola with us as well. We're thankful for each of them being here with us. We're going to have our interview that we normally like to have in the morning services, but just with things being what they are right now with COVID, we're having them in the evenings like we have all month. And so we're thankful they're here tonight, and we want to encourage you to interact with us. Send us your questions, your thoughts, things you'd like to know either about them, their ministry, New Zealand, whatever it might be. Send those in either via Facebook Messenger. You can text the church number. You can text my personal cell phone number. We'll try to get those questions in because we want you to get connected to what God's doing in their lives now and what he's going to do in their lives in New Zealand as well. So thank you for joining us tonight and all day with us.
Good to be here.
Yeah, you told us this is the first conference in person you've been to for a bit, right?
Yes, it has. Yeah, really since the end of March. Really was the last one we were in person. So yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, it's for those maybe trying to think about it because it's not maybe our normal way of life. They're normally in different churches raising partnerships and financial support, and obviously churches shuts down a lot of meetings, huh?
That's right. Yeah, it's been different, but God's been good. He's filled our schedule, which has been good. And we're just thankful for it, yeah.
Awesome. So let's start off tonight with the idea of how'd you get from where you're at to sitting on this platform tonight going to New Zealand. And so both of you take a moment, if you wouldn't mind, and just kind of let those watching know how'd you end up here, coming from what background, how'd you end up in church, hearing about Christ, becoming his follower, now all the way to New Zealand as the goal. So either one of you, let us know.
All right. Well, I was raised in a Catholic home my whole life, all the way up to about probably 11 years old. And my sister actually began dating a man who was a Christian, and he just had a burden for our family. And through that, he was able to find a church that was close to our house, that was gospel preaching and gospel centered, and he desired for us to at least get under the truth. And through that, God allowed us to, week by week, attend this church. And one by one, my family got saved. And I decided I was the last one. I got saved when I was at the age of 12 years old. And then a year later, at church camp, teen church camp, believe it or not, I was called to preach. I didn't really know to what capacity. I just knew I wanted to serve God my whole life. And ended up going to West Coast Baptist College. And it was during my freshman year at West Coast. I had a roommate who was from New Zealand, and really through circumstance and discussion and prayer, God confirmed it to me in the April youth conference at West Coast Baptist College that New Zealand was the place. And so we eventually got married in 2015. I think about that for a moment. 2015. And
Good save.
Yeah,
Good
right.
save.
Thank you. I had to think. And yeah, so here we are. So God's been good. God's directed our paths. He's led us to really each and every step. And it's been awesome to see him work just in ways that you can't even think of, really. The people I've met to get me even to visit New Zealand, and then just the contacts down there that have helped us now to get into the country. You know, it's just really step by step. My freshman year was 10 years ago, believe it or not, Pastor. So it's been a long time coming, but really I can honestly say every step of the way was guided by God. And yeah, here we are with you today on deputation. So
Awesome. Ms. Becca?
Yeah, so for me, I grew up in a Christian home my whole life. My dad's a pastor. And so for a while, I think I thought that my parents' faith was what would get me to heaven. So I struggled with that for a while, just not realizing it needed to be a personal decision that I needed to make. But when I was 11, it's funny, I would wait to hear if my dad was snoring, because if he wasn't snoring at night, maybe the rapture happened. And I struggled with, maybe the rapture happened and I'm left behind. Who do I know that's not saved that I could call? It's just so silly. I just struggled with that for a while. I thought, I'm going to take care of this. And so I asked my mom to show me some scripture verses that I already knew, but just to lead me through that, and I settled that, and I'm so grateful that I did. So I got saved when I was 11, and then I went to West Coast Baptist College, the youth conference in high school, and I surrendered to full-time Christian ministry while I went there, and I didn't know at what capacity God would have for me, but I attended West Coast Baptist College and went for my secretarial degree, which is just a 2-year degree, And after my freshman year, I took a missions trip to the Philippines. Now, it wasn't because I wanted to explore missions. I had a crush on a guy, and I wanted to go down there. It wasn't this guy either.
I was going to say, it sounds like it wasn't this guy.
It might
Oh,
get
boy.
a little bit
Ugly.
awkward. But the Lord used that opportunity in my life, not even at the moment. It was when I came home and just seeing the need outside of America and just things we don't even think about here. And God really opened my eyes to that. And I told my dad, I really think God wants me to serve. I don't know if it's foreign missions, but I think that's what he has for me. And he said, well, I don't know if this is emotions, because he's raised girls, so he knows a lot of things are emotional. He said, I want you to go back and finish your 2-year degree, and then if you still feel led, go back for your missions degree. So that's what I did, and I wasn't dating anybody at the time, and I knew, God, if you want me to serve as a single missionary, I'll do that. I didn't feel any leading in any direction, but I knew I wasn't going to date or talk to any guys that was not missions-minded. So God just brought Greg along, and I mean, it was perfect. He was missions, and I didn't feel a direction any certain place, and I just felt called to whatever he has for us together. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. The Lord works in strange ways, right? Awesome. Well, I'm glad to hear how you all ended up where you're at right now. So, going to New Zealand, tell us a little bit about it. Obviously, if anybody tuned in this morning, they may have already seen much of what was said about it. But just kind of help us out, start from scratch. Like, we don't know where New Zealand is, and that I learned something. Janetta, if you're watching, I asked him your question. I learned something. Act like we don't know anything about New Zealand, as if it were 2 islands and not one. So start from scratch and tell us a little bit about New Zealand, where it's at, what's it like, the demographics, the outlook, all those types of things.
Sure. So it's tucked down in the South Pacific, and it is made up of 2 islands, the North and the South Islands. So not too hard to forget. But it's a country of about 5 million people. In fact, I believe the most recent census put them above 5 million. So they've just hit that threshold, and they've been excited about that. That was a big deal for them. Mm-hmm. So a country of about 5 million people, and they are very much reliant on export and import. So because they're islands and they're so far away from anything else, as I mentioned this morning, they're the first country to see the new day every day. So we're coming up on 7 o'clock. It's almost, it's 10:18 a.m. tomorrow. So they've already been, into Monday. And because everything is so far, everything has to be brought in or shipped in. And so because of that, you have extremely high prices on things. You'll kind of have the worst things brought in, but the best things shipped out. And what I mean by that is, for example, the kiwi fruit there, New Zealanders are called kiwis, okay? Well, they actually are big exporters of the kiwi fruit as well. And if you go to the markets in New Zealand, you'll find kiwis that are all lopsided and all, wobble-wanky looking and just really, really odd looking. Well, that's because they ship the best ones out because they get the most money. So the worst ones stay. And so they are reliant very much on import and export. The country has been shown religion through its history, but unfortunately, it's been very cold religions. It's been religions that have been there, but not really affected anybody. I was talking with you earlier, Anglican, Protestant, those are very prevalent religions down there. Unfortunately, though, again, we know that those don't give you a relationship with Jesus, and so they are lacking that. They are very much, I guess the best way to put it, they're very laid back. There's really not a lot of drive for Kiwis. Leadership isn't really a big thing. They're very just kind of whatever happens type of style. And so because of that, that also plays into their aspects of faith. They don't really have a thought of faith. They don't think about, man, what's going to happen after I die. They're just, well, I'm here today, and that's great. Let's go, They're not really mean when it comes to sharing the gospel, but I will say you can definitely feel a wall. They don't mind if you're sharing the gospel, but once you come to them and share the gospel, it's like, hey, back off, type of thing. So that would be what I explain. I guess what I would kind of the main things of visiting there and talking with people there that really just pops out to me. They do love their country. Believe it or not, with this whole COVID thing, they are down to only one case in New Zealand. They've been 9 days straight with 0 cases, and that is because they went into lockdown. And there was no crime. There was no one, kind of bucking the rules. They do honor their country. They do enjoy and have, country pride. But the majority of them are lost, and so that's the need.
How do they, you spoke about it, that there's not really, pretty carefree and fine for you to share, not overly concerned themselves. What is it you find that they have an assurance about themselves, or a validation or contentment? What do you find it's resting on? What is it?
I would say status. Like if you go to the country of Auckland, or the city of Auckland, excuse me, they are a tech giant in the world. And so I think the fact that they have some things that the world desires that are prevalent in their country, they kind of hang their hat on that. They love the fact that they're independent, because they're so far from anyone else geographically in the world. That causes a sense of, hey, we can do this. We're away from everybody. We don't need anyone's help, but yet we can get by. And so I think a sense of independence is really what, if you'd say, kind of puffs their chest out a little bit as far as just what they hang their hat on. Yeah.
So just a reliance to the point, like you had said this morning, that there's not necessarily a religious bent they would have, though they maybe are influenced, but just the self-reliance of like, that's good for you, great, I'm fine,
right.
I'm good.
Right.
Not even like I'm trying to earn or figure out or forgive. It's just, I'm good.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
It really is. And I mean, you walk the streets and just the people are, I mean, you can bump into someone and they just, okay, whatever, like, all right, no big deal. Yeah, they're not mean about it.
No.
They're not going to come out and attack you for anything. In fact, it's been a little over a year ago, back last March, some of you might remember, there was this shooting at the mosque. And when that happened in New Zealand, I mean, that stuff doesn't happen. I mean, there's no violence. That was like big time for them.
Where are we?
Right, yeah, what's going on? And so they're not mean, but they really just are very lackadaisical. And I think that is kind of a challenge. When you're presenting the gospel to somebody, you have to show them, like, there's some urgency here. Mm-hmm. If you died today and you don't know, or you don't have a relationship with Christ, you're in trouble. Mm-hmm. And so to get them to kind of flip that switch and say, wow, there is a dire need in my life, that's a challenge. So
obviously that takes time for any of us. We know maybe in our context here in America or wherever we became a follower of Christ, that it takes time and it's different for everybody. But in your all's experience, and maybe Becca, if you want to think about answering this, what kind of amount of time do you see it typically takes from either your experience, both your all's experience, from talking with others over there? What amount of time do you typically see, though everybody's unique, in somebody going from where they're at to becoming a follower of Christ?
Yeah, so we're in contact with the pastor we'll be working with over there, and he's constantly sending us pictures of so-and-so got saved today, because they have the great opportunity of going door to door like we do here in the States. And some people will get saved at the door, but they have the same problem we have in the States of, okay, they're saved at the door, but how do we get them into the church? So, like same as here, we try to build a relationship with them first. And it's not impossible to see somebody saved and bring them into the church, but it does take time because, as Greg said, what was that quote you said earlier today about they're so friendly to you, but they're not willing to trust you right away. So you have to, and it might be even longer for us as Americans, like, what are you guys doing here? And so I think it'll take some time. It's hard to put like a timeline on it, but I think a longer time than it is here in the States, because like Greg said, it is tough to have them see urgency. And so it'll be tough on our part in just learning the culture and trying to figure out how we can not speed up the process, but get people into church.
Move it in, yeah. Do you find from talking with anybody who's there currently, whether it's Brother Hutchinson or any of the others that are there that you're in contact with, that because of the coldness of more ritualistic style in Anglicanism, is there a distrust then of church as an institution? Is that part of the why it is yes, there's the not having built trust, but there's also a distrust of church because of the ritualism, or have you found any of that at all?
Absolutely, yeah. I think that is another challenge we'll face. Is just it's always existed, but it's never been effective in anyone's life. Like, they've seen their grandparents, they've seen, great grandma and grandpa go through all these things with nothing to show for. So it's like, why would I give my whole life to this if that's all they've known? They've seen their forefathers do it. It hasn't given them anything. So what's the point of me going into it then?
Yeah, maybe more disinterest, not like they're not trusting, they're not interested.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Like, where's the fruit of it, huh?
Right.
Like, why do I actually need this in my life?
Right, yeah. So as far as distrust, like, I know with Brother Hutchins, the case, he's told me he's gained some valuable relationships down there. So again, it takes time. He's been there 2.5 years.
Yeah.
And, he's told me as well, but we are just getting started. So, he also recognizes what it's like.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and I know people are people everywhere. We know that. But there are unique challenges to each one. We've talked about some of those. Are there some other unique challenges to ministering in New Zealand? And maybe I guess we should ask a question that was asked earlier via Facebook was, which island are you going to? What city are you targeting?
Okay. Want to go down? Go ahead. You can take that one.
Yeah, so the pastor that we're going to work with is a national pastor, which is such a blessing to us. Most people go over and work with missionaries, which there's pros and cons to each one, or benefits, I should say. And so it'll be nice to be under someone who really understands the culture and really knows what works with their people. And they're actually in the North Island, the very top of the North Island. It's the city of Auckland. And it actually holds more people in that city than the entire South Island. So it's a very populated city, but it's very compacted. There's a lot of people in such a small space. But that's where we'll be starting out. We have to be sponsored in, so we'll be there probably a couple of years till we gain citizenship before we can start elsewhere.
Yeah, as far as a city to go to and plant the church that we'll plant or pastor, there's a few. I've looked at a couple cities. There's one in the South Island called Greymouth. I've looked there. A few cities in the North Island as well. I think a lot of it will probably depend on. We don't plan on going into a city and then just like one Sunday it's just me and Becca and we're just praying people in. Our goal is to have some people come probably from Auckland as kind of a
church planting team.
Right, yeah, kind of a core group. And so I think that will probably have some restrictions as far as geographically where we'll start. So a few cities we're praying about. Like I said, as Becca mentioned, the South Island is very wide open land-wise. A lot of land, but not a lot of people. Mm-hmm. So whereas the North Island, a lot more people in a very compacted area. So there's needs in both islands, but a few cities we're praying about. So.
What would be some of the unique challenges? We've talked a little bit about that in New Zealand, but maybe in some of the cities you all are considering, what do you think would be a highlight of a challenge you would face that's different? For instance, like in the States, you can minister in California. It's wildly different than Massachusetts. It's the same because people are people, and the gospel's still the gospel. Jesus still saves. We know that. But they're different people. It's like where I'm from in Texas. It's wildly different than Washington State, where my wife's from. So I would assume New Zealand would be similar, north-south, and then cities within. So what maybe is a highlight of a challenge you would face in Greymouth or one of the other places you might be considering?
Definitely. So Auckland, where I mentioned before, where we'll start at, huge tech. Video games, technology, they're just a hub for it. So with that, you, again, as I mentioned, you kind of have that status symbol, like almost like I'm higher than you type of thing. Whereas if you go to the South Island, there's a lot of farming culture. So you have farmers, you have people kind of living off the land. You also have in the South Island, you have a little more, I wouldn't say as much wealth in the South Island, if that makes sense. So you kind of have a, I wouldn't call them poor either, but they are just not as wealthy as probably up someplace in Auckland. And so you have kind of a timidness, almost like a shyness, kind of, in the South Island. For give you an example, when I was there my first time visiting, I came across a church member in a church. He was a dairy farmer. And when I say he lived out in the middle of nowhere, he lived out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it was a pasture. I mean, it was hundreds of acres. And he built, I mean, it was like a cookie cutter house. I mean, square, 4 walls. He had a couch, a TV, a bed in his bedroom, and a kitchen, and of course his restroom and stuff. And that was it in his whole house. And he was the most humble, reserved, timid, shy guy. And I couldn't even get a word out of him. But he was so nice, but just, very shy. So you see that a lot in the South Island.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just in Auckland, there's a lot of universities where people from Asia come over for like the tech. And so maybe a challenge of the North Island is the diversity of cultures. It's like a melting pot of all these different countries coming together. But you can also reach those people, and when they go back home to their countries, I mean, you've ultimately affected more than just New Zealand. So it's a neat challenge that we could face in the North Island.
So you bring that up as something I was stirring in the back of my mind for a question was exactly that. My wife and I had watched, and forgive the excursion here for a second, we had watched this documentary on massive hotels and how they run. And one of them was in Singapore. And so we were watching that, and they were talking about how in that specific area, so many people, it's not uncommon to, like you said, just pop, pop, pop. And so my question was, in my mind was, I wonder if New Zealand has some of this as well. And so it sounds like it. Do you find then with different nationalities or different geographic regions coming together there, is there a common language, I assume, and then what are the challenges in reaching some of them or getting to know some of them? And so if they're coming in for jobs, what are you guys seeing with that, or what are those on the island currently seeing?
I would say, I mean, overall, it's English. Everyone knows English, but there are a lot of Koreans coming over because it's free in New Zealand. I mean, more freedoms, I guess I should say. And so it would be neat if we could have like a Korean church, or like ministry, where we could have somebody preach in Korean. I think we could reach a lot of people that way. I don't know. There's a lot of different Asian,
It's funny you mentioned the people coming over. So in the video this morning, I mentioned it talks about the earthquake in 2011. They are still rebuilding from that. In fact, there are entire neighborhoods where the government has gone through and just taken cans of spray paint, and they spray these giant red X's on these houses, and they look completely fine. But you can't live in them because the foundation's damaged, and it's considered a hazard. And so in 2011, it's 2020 now, so you do the math. I mean, that's been years, almost a decade now, and they're still rebuilding. So because of that, a lot of people came over for construction. All of these construction companies, I mean, just exploded
Overnight. Yeah.
And so they hired all these people for cheap labor. And so because of that, I've seen Brazilians, I've seen Filipinos. I mean, they've all just come over to work. And like Becca said, it's a huge opportunity. I know a friend of mine in Christchurch who has a Chinese ministry. Every Friday night they meet and have a Chinese ministry. And I mean, there's quite a few that come out. So yeah, it's definitely prevalent.
I just think that's so amazing to think you all can be missionaries there that indirectly end up having missionary influence so many places that maybe when it first was in your heart, we're going to go to New Zealand. It's like we're concentrating on the Kiwis. But now there's this idea of we could literally span out with just a little bit of extra planning and people, the right people, like you said, in place. This could become just wildly expansive. And that's exciting. That's really neat to think about.
It really is. It's cool. And it's amazing. When I was in 2014, it was a Filipino ministry, and that same church has now shifted to a Chinese ministry.
Wow.
So, I mean, in 6 years, You know, they've had entire groups of Filipinos, Chinese, so it really is happening down there.
Wow.
It's incredible.
That's neat. That's really exciting to hear about, too, just the long-term potential
Right.
of what could happen. So we're talking about incredible things that can happen, but we're all human. What would be something that concerns you all about moving overseas? I mean, it's the Lord leading. We trust him. He's good. His grace is sufficient. We know all that. But we're all human. Would you all be willing to share with us so we'd know how to pray for you all? And maybe you'd even say there's other missionaries who we've talked to have gone over, and maybe there's commonality, maybe there's not. What do you say? There's all these great opportunities, but what's a concern maybe each or both of you have?
I think for both of us is the obvious, leaving family. And when we went over there in August, I was, I think, 15 weeks pregnant. So I was very emotional at that point anyways, but I was crying to Greg. I said, Greg, this is so far. I mean, it took forever, it felt like, to get there. Just the flights, like from LAX to Australia, I think is 14 hours. And then you have to get Australia to New Zealand is another 3 hours or 4 hours. So it's a long trip, and I thought, it's tough to sometimes get family across the country, much less across the world. It's, I mean, and then we have a baby that, you know, grandparents are now more involved that way, and I think that's the toughest part that I feel and that I face right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously very real as well. I think for me, maybe as a man, is just the idea of at least supporting churches. You know, I mean, we have churches whose members are giving of their hard-earned money, and so that we can go to New Zealand and present the gospel. I want to do the best I can at that, you know, and I don't want to let these people down, and I know that I'm serving the Lord, and it's ultimately, you know, I'm doing it for His glory. But at the same time, there is some pressure, like, you know, I guess, the lack of a better term, a result-driven, you know, society that we live in. And so
Americans being performance-oriented?
Yeah, no, never. So there's some, I guess, fear in that. But also for me, just being able to, I think just lead my family, you know, on a foreign field. That's a challenge to me. You know, it's one thing to do in America where everything that we want literally is at our fingertips. But to go around the world and replant them and as Becca said, take them from grandma and grandpa and all that stuff, you know, that's something as a man I feel like I want to make sure that I do it and I do it well. I lead them well and just it's a smooth transition. So,
Amen. So we're talking about relocating, which I think brings up kind of a twofold question that was sent in by some of our members, kind of go as A and B. Number one, describe living expenses over there. You've mentioned it's an island. Import-export means more cost for everyone. So describe maybe the expense of living over there, and then the amount of deputation money you're needing to raise. And then lastly, since I'm adding all these questions back to back, what percentage are you at, or where are you at in the journey of raising funds?
Sure, yeah. It is very expensive because of the export and import. To give an example, we were there in August, and gas was $6.84 a gallon. So that's kind of a way to kind of put your mind to it. And what was your eye-opening thing with the grapes?
Oh yeah, grapes were like $9 a kilo.
A kilo, not a pound.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's it's pricey. As far as what we need, so as far as ministry and living expense, about $9,000 is what BIMI, our sending agency, has recommended for us. They've recommended a little bit lower, but with this insurances and things that kind of are added on, they kind of shoot for 9,000. So that's kind of my number I have in my head. And again, that's living and, you know, starting a ministry. So as far as the dollar, though, one thing that's working in our favor right now, especially because of COVID, is $1 here is $1.66 New Zealand. So that's in our favor, which is good. So that might not always stay the same, obviously, but that's a benefit right now. And then what was the last question?
Where are you at in the
Percentage.
journey?
Yes,
Where are
in
you
the
at
journey.
percentage-wise, et cetera?
Yes, so we will be, hopefully, Lord willing, we just had a supporting church take us on last week. We're about 13% right now. We'll probably be at 15% when we go out full-time. So, which is what I wanted, going part-time, and then obviously with the whole COVID thing, losing meetings, I wanted to have 15% without all that stuff, and now we still have it with all that stuff. So
Blessed.
God's been good. Yeah, God's
Awesome.
been really good.
Awesome. And for those watching, I know you understand this, but missionary endeavors, I mean, frankly, they just take money. I mean, that's all there is to
Yeah.
say about it, right?
It's reality.
And we here in America have this wonderful stewardship window granted to us where we have great liberties to us given, great financial opportunities. And I don't want to sound insensitive about COVID right now. I know some people are suffering and hurting. I'm not downplaying that. But even in the midst of this, we are very opulent as a culture. And it just reminds us that opulence has an eternal purpose. It's not wrong to have stuff. It's wrong for the stuff to have us, right? But my point is, we have this opportunity to give towards couples. And so sometimes we hear that number, $9,000. Well, I wish I had $9,000. But we have to remember, you are relocating to a totally different culture, climate. It has different expenses. And then, as you heard, this is ministry expenses too. So they're going and they're plowing ground, and that takes money. I mean, in other words, there's not a building and 100 people there.
No.
It's trying to get to that point where we can establish a core of people who are following Christ, and then establish a place, because they seem to be, as America is in this sense, an institutional driven place. So people aren't meeting outside; they're meeting inside. Maybe they can meet outside, but it's very much a brick and mortar type society. And so I just encourage you to realize that's a lot of money in maybe our minds, but it's really not a lot of money when we consider where they're going. And it's a partnership we have opulence here in America to make. And I would just challenge us to consider, as we're coming to the end of Missions Month, how am I going to be involved? It doesn't mean you got to give $9,000 a month, but you could partner through Faith Baptist with that. Maybe it's $5 a week, $30 a week, $100 a week. I don't know. But whatever it is, God's grace will be enough. So we can partner. So people can go to these countries and get the gospel rolling in that area that God put you guys in. And so maybe describe a little bit of that. We've talked about finances. Now talk about, obviously you're going to Auckland originally, and then when you do branch out, describe a little bit of your all's philosophy about what you're seeking to accomplish. Obviously church planning is the goal, but what's the method you all want to go about it?
Sure. So, as I mentioned before, we'll launch out after we get our residency. And then our goal is to plant a church in a city, and then see people saved and discipled and train them. And obviously through God's wisdom and God's leading, we will pray that God will raise up a couple to then go out from our church and plant another church. One of the things that I've been kind of convinced of, if you want to call it that, is just the idea that me and Becca will always be Americans. We can't remove that from us. We're always Americans. And so just naturally, as it is, we have a barrier there. Obviously English, we speak English, but as far as just ethnically, we have a barrier. We can't avoid that. And so because it takes so long to build a relationship with Kiwis, why would I want to plant myself in a city for 10 years and build all those relationships and really get going to then up and leave and go start a new church? To me, that just seems counterproductive. And so our goal is to see people, again, trained and discipled to then go out and plant churches and just multiply the gospel all throughout the country and kind of be, I guess you can say, a hub church, if you will, or a mother church to get these other churches out and share the gospel. Of course, Becca, you can share just some things we've talked about as a woman.
Sure. So while I was there, the church that we're going to work with, they have ladies' meetings, kind of similar to what we do here in the States. And there are actually quite a few, I'm sure this is everywhere, but quite a few single women or maybe women who have gotten a divorce or whatever coming to the church, or sometimes they're like the leaders of their home coming to the church. So to be able to minister to ladies and children, that'll be my role alongside my husband.
Awesome. That sounds like an exciting time. So let me ask you this. Obviously the goal is church planting. Great ministry opportunities there with ladies, no matter the situation they find themselves in, building that generation and affecting the next one. So maybe, how can we as a church, made up of individual Christians, how can we as individuals, as families, and as churches here stateside be an encouragement to you all? Money's a given. That's a given, right? Right. Okay. So money is essential.
More money. No, just
More
kidding.
money. Yes. I like you. That's the way to do it with missions. More money for sure. But help us out. What's something encouraging we can do? Certainly we can read updates, but maybe tell us this is encouraging to us, to me, to us, when, and then fill in a blank for us.
For me, and again, this obviously differs by church, but one of the things that I've always wished that I could have done growing up is take a missions trip. One of the things that I know, even with talking with missionaries, and I think it would be the same in my own personal life, is the encouragement you get when a church that supports you takes 5, 10 people down for even 2-3 weeks, and literally is working hand in hand with you on the front lines, on the field, just investing their time and just being down there working alongside you. That's incredible to me. Just to think that, obviously prayer, that's again kind of a given in the money, but just to have someone actually be there and just, I know as we talked about missing family, just to see a familiar face, will be awesome. And so to have a group of people come down, to me, that would be just a huge encouragement. I know it will be in my life when we're there. So.
Yeah, for me, even right now, going to these different churches and getting to meet different people, there's certain people that I feel like God brings into our life to become friends with. And even right now on deputation, that's been such a blessing. We were at a church, and there's a lady who, she claims to be our daughter's grandmother. Uh-huh. And so, we'll send her pictures and just keep in contact with people. And right now, that's super encouraging. But I imagine even more so when we're there and we can keep in contact with more than just our family, but supporting churches who get to know maybe our struggles or maybe our victories, and outside of just the prayer letter that you're going to read, it's encouraging just to have those different relationships from different churches across the country.
That's really neat. So you all both talked about people coming and then building those relationships, seeing those people, obviously being connected that way. I want to ask two things. First, how can we, because of the beauty of technology, stay connected? It used to be we were joking at lunch about the letters, and that's a good thing, but maybe a generation go by. Not that it's bad to have the letters, but it's so much more accessible now. How can they connect with you all digitally to where they're not waiting and worried about trying to catch a letter here or an update there? They can see it in real time, right? Today, the Friars are at fill in the blank, or, hey, I'm on your email list. So maybe could you guys throw out, if you're comfortable, the best ways to be connected with you all digitally so they can see what's cooking ministry-wise, personally, know how to pray for you?
Sure. We're both on Facebook. That's one. Becca's on that one a little more than I am. You iPhone users and your screen time, you know what I'm talking about. So, but yeah, so Facebook for both of us, and I'm also on Twitter. So I'm usually on that one a little bit more. And one of the things that I do, I try to post a church that we'll be in at least once a week. That's kind of, obviously it's been different with COVID. We haven't been in a lot of churches. But we'll probably post yours by next Friday. This is kind of show people where we're going, how things are going. And then this is a little bit farther down the road, probably when we're on full-time deputation. Our goal is I would like to implement, like you said, a video. Whether, let's say we're in Texas and, we're, I don't know, off of Highway 10, who knows, and we, we're at a hotel, just give a quick update and then post that video, again, on Facebook or Twitter. Will kind of be what I would like to have happen. Obviously, times will be busy, we'll be traveling a lot, but I do want to make time, like you said, update people, so.
I do have Instagram as well. But can I say the only reason his screen time is down is because there's no sports. So,
busted?
Yeah.
Busted. Whew. Man, that's rough, though. Those of you who have an iPhone, you know what I'm talking about. I swapped from an Android to an Apple, and the first week it popped up and said, now that is somebody else's phone. I don't know who's been on this phone that long. That's from somebody. Awesome. So 2 closing things, perhaps. Number one of our young people texted in through his parents saying he wants to give you all, to encourage you and be a part of partnering with you all, $20, and he's throwing down a gauntlet challenge to somebody to match his $20. Oh, wow. He's giving it tonight via his parents. That sounds convenient. But he's giving it tonight. He's throwing out the challenge to somebody to match that. And here's what I'd encourage you to do. If you're matching that $20, send it in through includefaith.org/give and mark it, match. And if somebody says, but what if somebody else matches it? We're not going to cry about it, and there are no refunds. So there's that as it is. So you're busted with that. So I think that's one thing. Second thing for closing, I would say would be this. If we can connect and be encouraging that way, but you said it earlier about people coming to visit. Every missionary we have, we ask them the same thing because we really want this to be a heart that we have as a congregation, that this isn't about pastors and missionaries going. It's about Christians being sent. So some are sent to be there more permanent. Others are sent in a more temporary fashion. So our desire as a church is always to hear for the single person out there, for the young married couple out there, for the newly retiree out there, for the former pastor, the former assistant pastor, the former whatever, if they wanted to come to New Zealand to partner with you all for a space, what does that look like, and how much do they need to consider?
Okay, good question. How much as in financially, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so it really depends on the time of the year. Financially, I check flights. I'm a flight geek, if you want to call it. I love finding cheap flights. You can find flights as low as $450. I mean, that'd be a great deal. But
Real quick,
yes,
pre or post COVID?
that was pre.
Wow. Okay.
Pre-COVID,
So I was
yep.
about to say, I know you
Yeah.
can fly really cheap
Yeah.
right now in a lot of places, but
Yeah. So that's pre. So and
that's
so
astounding.
yeah, it was. I've seen them. It happened usually in February because you have to remember, New Zealand is opposite. So right now we're coming into summer. They're going into winter. So there's the cheaper flights for this time going there because it's winter for them. So, but I would say round trip. If you came for, we'll say, how about a month? We'll say that 1 month's time, you would probably roughly need, I would say, between 25 to 3,000 would be my rough estimate for a month. We could help you with lodging if you want to stay with us. We'll get a guest bedroom for you. But
And charge a reasonable rate.
exactly, yes.
For missions.
Yeah, that's right. So, and then what that would look like if you were to come, I would just say a lot of outreach would probably be the main thing. Just really, knocking doors or having events. One of the big things in New Zealand are community events. Buy an inflatable and go to a community and on a Saturday afternoon, blow it up, have some hamburgers, hot dogs, and invite people out and hopefully see them come to church. So that's a big thing that we would definitely have you involved in. And then if you're comfortable preaching, I mean, obviously that's the main thing. But I will say this. Again, I kind of stressed this morning. Before you ever go across the sea, make sure you're going across the street.
Sure.
Because you'll never go to New Zealand if you don't go to your neighborhood. I know it sounds so cliche, but it really is. Ask God to develop a heart and a desire for souls right here, and then you'll really see God, I think, move towards worldwide outreach.
Yeah.
At least that's how it was in my own personal life. I never thought New Zealand, good night. But now God has given me a desire for that, really only through Him. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
So, and again, we're stressing that's to anybody who's single, young married. I mean, even if you have kids, maybe you need to cash out some vacation time and go. I mean, honestly, I think Americans, it would do all of us good, myself included, to reevaluate what we do with our opulence and our freedom. And to think that, well, I only get 2 weeks of vacation a year, why would I use 10 days of it? I'd say, really, it could be flipped the other way. I could use 10 days to go to New Zealand and be a legitimate help. Well, I'm not a preacher. Well, you'll have somebody there to help you. Is that right? You'll have that. Well, I'm not sure how to host a ladies' Bible study. You'll have somebody there to help you, right? Yeah, I'm not sure how to do a children's event in the park in New Zealand with Kiwis. I have no idea. You'll have people there. And so I just always want us to be thinking, if I'm single, I can do this. If I'm married, we can do this. If I'm retired, we can do this. I don't have a lot of money. You can do this. I mean, you really can do it, even if that sounds like, well, it's easier said than done. You can do it, right? There are people who will partner with you to get that done. And so I'm just wanting us to think about there's an opportunity there, right? There's a doorway there.
Yep, absolutely. And I think too, if you really if you're diligent about it, God will kind of do the rest for sure. I know in my life, I've never even, I can't even imagine the doors that God has opened up for us to get there. From people we've met to just even getting into the country, it's just been incredible. So as you said, when you desire to do it, God does the rest.
Yeah. So any closing thoughts you would give to us about either something God's doing in your heart right now via deputation, something you want to challenge, encourage us with, leave us with, anything like that before we sign off tonight?
I got one. It might sound kind of, I don't know, petty-ish, but it's a big thing in my life right now. Some of you might have seen us today in our car, our white car. We're trying to sell that car because it's no longer big enough for us as our family is growing. And we're hoping to be on the road full time here at the beginning of July. So we're about a month away. And we need to sell that car and get a new car for deputation. So I know that sounds like not a real big eye-opening thing, but it is heavy on my heart. So pray that that car sells and that we can get the right vehicle for deputation that will last and keep us safe. So that's
Absolutely.
for me.
For me, just like I said, prayer for God's grace for our families, for us, and just what we don't even realize we're going to face on deputation and just missions and all that.
Awesome. Thanks for being with us today. It was good to have live missionaries. I've enjoyed Missions Month. I've enjoyed the interviews, but I was glad not to be staring at a laptop tonight. I'm not going to lie. So it was good. So thankful you all are with us. I just want to challenge and encourage you tonight. Follow them on social media. Get connected with them. If you say, well, I'm not really into social media, do they have an email list I can join? The answer is?
Yes, Christ2Kiwis@gmail.com.
Is it a 2 or
Number
TW?
2. Yep,
Okay.
number 2. Yep.
All right, so you can join that. Say it one more time for us.
Christ2Kiwis@gmail.com.
So you can get on that list and stay connected. Know what's going on so you can pray, so you can partner through the church with giving. And we want to be a part of what God's going to do in their life. And maybe tonight you're watching and you're stirred about being a part, not just in giving and in prayer, but in going, being a part of whatever that looks like in the future for them. Why don't you contact them directly, start getting some logistics and some thoughts and some budgeting figured out, so when that rolls around, you can be a part of that, all right? Thanks for joining us. If there's anything at all we can do for you, please let us know this week. Be in prayer for the Fryer family. We're glad that they were with us today. If you need anything, you call or text us. Have a great night.